Can I say something I hate about Amazon?
What?
This is related, I swear. Um, I've noticed that people will go onto Amazon, they'll buy a book, and then they'll leave a 1-star rating and a negative review because something happened during shipping.
Right.
The book was damaged. And I'm like, oh, dear audience, don't do that because that's not actually reviewing the book. Just contact the seller and get a replacement, read it, and then leave a review because you are screwing the author over for something that they had no control over.
I think the level, like the fact that everything needs to be 4 stars plus or it's bad,
Yeah.
has me. If you look at, I mean, the original Star Wars trilogy, not well reviewed. Like really not. If you look at some of the stuff that's come out and people are kinder to it with time, because it was new, because it was a paradigm shift, people were brutal to it.
Look, there's a reason most people are exposed to Star Wars at like 5 years old. Is the average I've discovered. My best friend saw it when he was 2.
Wow.
Apparently. And I'm like, okay, I think that's a little early, but okay, you beat me. Actually, we probably watched it about the same year.
Well, there are reasons that there's always the children under 6 character.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. People complain about the children under 6 characters, but children under 6 watch Star Wars, so there should be something for them.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of those complaints I think is so stupid. Like, okay, I don't care what anybody says. The Ewoks are awesome. But if you don't like the Ewoks, that's fine. Your kid likes it. Shut up, please.
Yeah. And even like the Porgs in The Last Jedi, it's like it was their solution to cover up the puffins that were everywhere because they were on a puffin sanctuary.
Is that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Because they do look a lot like puffins. I just found the Chewbacca eating the porgs so like mistake. That's sort of the issue. That is the tangible detail, that moment that kind of is the macro that the micro that explains the macro for that movie. There was a mean-spiritedness to that film.
Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those people. Look, I watched The Mandalorian and I don't get mad at Grogu for eating the eggs. I'm like, he's hungry. No. She's not going to miss that many of them.
Well, also,
like it's terrible. And
also,
I know
he's a baby, and to me, that's a sign that he's got a lot of dark side in him.
Yeah.
Right. I can actually justify that. Chewbacca eating the porgs.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Like clearly it was meant to be a joke.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't think about the context. I think there's a reason Rian Johnson is now making murder mysteries. I think.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a shining example of a guy who you have to take a light touch to Star Wars, but every arrogant SOB wants to make Empire not A New Hope.
Well, it's, we talked about, don't use your writing as therapy.
Yeah.
But especially if it's someone else's character.
Yeah.
If you're doing work for hire, like the Age of Conan line Marvel did with the Belit story. And oh yeah, this is a character I rolled in a tabletop campaign. I'm still mad. But it's someone else's work. And especially if you're a creative, you should have some respect for that.
Okay, but there's financial incentives to not, right? Because if you create a character and it becomes this big thing.
Well, I mean, even when Alan Moore made Watchmen, he originally wanted to use certain established characters that DC had just acquired, but they were like, no, you're going to ruin them. They'll be completely unrecognizable. You can do it, just you have to make new characters.
I was like, okay. But I mean, Alan Moore doesn't give a shit about money. So, I mean, bless him. He goes a little too hard the other way.
Yeah. And there was also okay, what is the name? It's the Furies from Apocalypse in DC.
Yeah.
Okay. There was a mini series a few years ago, and it was basically the writer went into Dan DiDio's office,
Okay.
or was it, when did Dan DiDio come in?
He was
That's-
there, I think, because that was Big
Yeah.
Barda and Company.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
remember
she-
that series.
Yeah, she came in and said, I want to write a Handmaid's Tale in the DC universe with these characters. Well, these characters are already being used. Well, who else could I write? Well, there's the Furies. So she walks out with the DC encyclopedia, and that was
Mhm.
her research.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Me Too on Apocalypse, which
Yeah.
Let me tell you, all the ways Me Too on Apocalypse does not work.
No.
And even then, the writing, it wasn't a Me Too story. The way it's set up, it just doesn't make any sense.
And nobody wants that from their superheroes. You know, we want that's escapist work. We don't, I know people, again, they don't see how Alan Moore went just far enough away from things
Mhm.
to comment. And they
Yeah.
don't, they're bringing things that are far away closer, as opposed to really going deep allegory and letting people see what they want. I mean, one of the books I really enjoyed about the industry is she co-writes it with a female writer from Rolling Stone, but Tori Amos wrote a book called Piece by Piece.
Mhm.
And it's part autobiography, part kind of creative business guide. And one
Might
of
have to look into that.
one of the stories she tells is, now I think this was actually partially right advice, partially not,
Mhm.
but she was really putting in like after shows, staying behind, hugging everybody. And Neil Gaiman said to her, people aren't coming to, they're not paying to hear you, to see you hug them. They're here to hear you sing.
Honestly, I don't know about back then, but like the fans we see now,
They're there for the hug.
the hug is absolutely
Yeah,
huge
and that's
deal.
why I said I don't agree with that. But she also talked about a time when you know, she was known as the cornflake girl, and she kept going, but in the song I'm the raisin girl. Yeah, they totally missed, because the first lyric is never was a cornflake girl, but she got named the cornflake girl. But she got so sick of music journalists telling her what her songs were about and telling her that she was wrong when she tried to go, actually, it's about this. She just stopped talking about what her songs were about.
And it's like, I totally get that.
Oh, I have
actually
taken that to heart.
I hate the concept of death of the author. Like,
I
if I'm right here and I'm telling you what it means, that's what it means.
My attitude, I believe in coma of the author.
I like that one.
Yeah, because if there's no information, think what you want. Right.
And it especially in fandom, where people will evolve the story and they'll develop like their own versions of these characters. And even I did it in fan fiction. It's like the way I wrote Jack Frost was very different from the way one of my friends wrote Jack Frost.
Right.
That was fine. But for me, it still needs to be grounded in the original work.
Right.
And it's like, oh, well, this is my headcanon that this character is this. Okay, but that contradicts what's in the original story.
Right.
Or it contradicts something the creator has said.
Right.
At that point, screw death of the author. You're just doing your own thing.
That's right.
And you're probably coping with something.
Yeah.
Please get that dealt with.
And that's why I think if there is no information about what an author intended, right, go for it. And then there are some times that the author is just not self-aware about what they're doing. I mean, I'm sorry, The Witcher is a beautiful Polish political allegory, even though the writer of The Witcher hates that idea. It still works. I'm not saying that's the intent, right? You can use it as something the same way, you know, when I talked to the God of War dev team about, you know, Kratos's PTSD, they were like, that was not at all in our minds. It was just so in the source material. Now, of course, now they're just rolling around in it, right? Like trauma is the theme of Ragnarok.
I think they took your notes to heart.
I think I've been talking about it so damn much. They're like, yeah, you know what? She's now, okay, the Norse handle it differently than, and I love that shift of the respect for Greek tradition in the original games and then the respect for Norse tradition in the new games. It was such a wonderful way to evolve the character, evolve the art style, evolve how the games play in a way that felt defensible is the wrong word, but it's the one I'm pulling right now, right? I can go, all right, it's a change, but
Makes sense.
Kratos has moved, right?
Yeah.
He's got a new family, he's in a new land. So yeah, he's doing things differently, the game's doing things differently. Cool. Really good idea. Right? But does that mean that my connection regarding trauma is wrong? Well, no, the original game starts with him throwing himself off a cliff trying to kill himself. You know, dude's got some issues. It just because something's not intentional doesn't mean it's not there. But if a creator actually says no, if somebody starts citing intent in something,
Yeah.
and the creator goes no, the creator is the expert on their intent,
Yes.
and the critic doesn't have the right to override the creator and say the creator doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. And especially for me, it's like, we see fans who they'll be like, oh, well, I want this character to be this sexuality or this or that. And I'm over here going, okay, all my characters are crafted a certain way. And that influences who they are. And like the sexuality might not make too big a difference. Most of my stuff is straight characters, sorry. But it's just I know these characters. I know who they are. I developed them into what they are. So please stop trying to force something on them.
Well, and I think that it's better for somebody, if you're like, I don't know how to write a gay character, don't.
And that's another thing. Yeah, I saw a thread recently on Twitter, and it was aimed specifically at artists, but it's like, and it's a sentiment I've seen repeated where it's like, if you don't draw people of color or you don't draw this or that, and your excuse is you don't know how, well, that's not good enough. And you're not actually a good artist if you aren't interested in learning.
Okay.
And I'm like,
go ahead. Sorry.
And it's like, to a point, I get the idea of it, but it's also like, please just let me draw my busty Caucasian redheads in various states of undress. Please just leave me alone.
Well, and I don't think people who say things like that understand the ass clenching terror of trying to step into that breach and getting accused of appropriating or racism or all that stuff.
There's so much pressure for it. And I've been editing volume 1 of Calidus Chronicles, and there's a point where it's like the Asian coded characters are introduced, and I'm reading this one shot and I'm like, I can see like 5 different places where this could go wrong. And it's like, I've got a while before I start bringing in other characters, but I'm also like rethinking all the names, and I'm like, what if there's something wrong with this? And I just don't know. It's
and sometimes
the stress.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to do it anyway. I, went through that crisis with Solomon, and I'm glad I did that character, right? But you don't, because you don't want to be disrespectful, you don't want to be ignorant, you don't want to offend anybody. The awareness that you will sometimes, and sometimes people are just gonna, the stuff I've seen people say about my intents, like, I know it's not true, but they are convinced, and that's through the damage they brought to the table and what they need to believe so that they can sleep at night, because something about that rattled their self-concept somehow. And especially with feminist spaces, oh my god, the stuff people have said about, I don't know how a feminist accuses another feminist of just doing it for men's attention. If people were looking for male approval, the last thing you do is self-identify as a feminist. Like, that's just like, what, that's about the greatest the greatest way to make a guy's testicles shrink up in his body, right? Like, I know this. So what are you and first of all, if you've ever seen anything I'm about, it's pretty obvious that, you know, I don't give a shit. But I end up, if somebody does that to me, it's like, oh, well, I don't respect you the way I did before you said that.
Yeah.
I can disagree with somebody and respect them, but now I don't respect you. And that's something I think people need to consider when they do level criticism, especially brutal criticism.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
I showed you a screenshot of a tweet conversation an artist I follow had
yeah.
where it's she does these really pretty like light pinups.
Mhm.
And so she posted somewhere they had like vaguely fighter poses and like
Okay.
one of them
Oh
was carrying
yeah,
a sword
the
or
choose your
something.
fighter. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it was just a playful choose your fighter
Yeah.
caption.
Yeah.
And someone said, none of these outfits are suitable for fighting. And like they don't have boots, and why are their ankles so tiny? And she was just like, it was a joke.
Yeah.
And they're like, and then they responded again. It's like, how can you call yourself a woman?
Oh,
And
that
draw
happens.
stuff
Yeah.
like this? And I'm like, how dare you?
Yeah. Yeah. But that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think a lot of people pay their pain forward. So somebody said that to them and it really hurt. So they did it to somebody else.
Yeah. And it's something I do see a lot in art. I saw a while back, there was a conversation where it was, if an artist whitewashes your character when you commission them, don't pay them, demand your money back, and, you know, basically cancel them online and tell people never to commission them. And I'm like, did you stop and ask, like, if it was an accident? Did you communicate with them and say, hey, this character's skin is supposed to be darker?
Right.
And I got I don't remember, I got a few comments on that, none of which were very nice.
But that's crazy. That's exactly what I thought. Like, no, communicate with the artist first, please.
Yeah. And like at the time I had Jessica Rabbit wannabe in my bio.
Okay.
And someone responded with, oh, she has Jessica Rabbit wannabe. Yikes. I was like, leave me alone. And oh, I looked over her art and she only draws white people. Yes, because that's what I'm comfortable with, because I don't want people like you coming after me.
Well, that's the thing. A lot of people go like artists, even artists of color, they will go lighter skinned on the first draft because when they go darker, they've been told to do it over.
Yeah. And the worst part of that conversation was I don't even remember what someone else said, but I was like, just shut up and get lost.
Yeah.
Oh, are you telling me to go pick cotton?
Oh boy.
And I said, no, I told you to leave me alone.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of those ones. This lovely lady I talked to online, her name's India Willoughby. She's first trans presenter in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously ladies had a bit of a rough road, right?
Oh, yeah.
But she was getting into this woman who happened to be Black, and the woman kept calling her trans woman, all one word. And she kept saying, it's 2 words, please. That's a sensitive point for people who don't know. It's because, you know, you wouldn't write Asian woman, all one word, Jew woman, you know, it's Asian woman, 2 words. So trans woman, 2 words, because trans women are women. And so she responded to one of this woman's adamant that she wasn't going to stop with Black woman, all one word. Huge blow up, racism, you know.
Yeah.
And she was really rattled by it. And it's one of those things where, yeah, you can be the toughest person in the world and something like that is gonna get you, because I think that's one of those ones, especially with race, you know what you intended. A lot of people do not have the confidence of subject to really know for certain. They know they didn't have racist intent.
Yeah.
But this is such a subjective area that people really get shook. And I think that's an important thing to remember when leveling those sorts of criticisms is much better, especially if you're going to accuse somebody of something like that. You better explain to them what's wrong with it
Mhm.
instead of just going racist, homophobe, sexist, transphobe, whatever. You got to tell them what the problem is.
Yeah, and most artists in that situation, they'd be like, "Oh, hey, yeah, just let me fix that for you. I can have
Yeah.
it done in an hour."
Yeah.
Get that.
Yeah. But it is true that even artists who I've worked with artists, I said, no, you've got to, like, her face is too white. I was like, really? You're sure? And I've said, yeah, this because every other time I've tried to do that, they've sent it back. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Sometimes I'll say now, because it's so widespread,
Mhm.
I know you've been told this before, but please, I'll say, here is the reference for the bone structure we want and the skin tone we want. Do this. So they know you can make somebody look like they're from Ghana as opposed to, mixed race American.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the thing. If you start assuming intent, I know I keep going back to this, but when you're giving criticism, it's a bad idea to assume intent. And I know it is a tick developed through academia to assume intent in postmodern writing, but it will not get you if you actually want somebody to accept your criticism and take it to heart, it's not a good way to do it because they'll immediately go, no, that was not in my head at all. You're wrong. Next. And totally understandably, right?
Yeah.
Like that's what a sane, healthy person does. It's like, okay, you're making no attempt to understand what I do. So I'm not going to listen to you. And that's a really important thing with criticism as well. A sense that somebody actually understands what you were attempting to do and gives you credit for something. I don't care what, give them credit for something, because if it's just everything is no bad, it really seems like you're speaking through your damage, not a legitimate critique. And I know there are some people that believe that, well, if it's good, they don't need to hear that. They need to know what's wrong so they can improve. Like, I don't know what happened to these people as children that they develop that point of view, but that's insane.
There's what's called the sandwich method of critique, which is say something nice, give your critique,
right,
and then finish with something nice.
Except I had one person say that because of the sandwich method, they now see all compliments as backhanded insults.
I can see that. Like, I think it's definitely something that it works better.
Oh, it's got to be sincere.
Well, it not just that, it works best in a creative situation where it's like, if I were to show a piece of art or a story to someone, it's like, I like this bit, you could fix this bit, but I like this part too.
Well, and the other thing I've found when something is not baked, right? And I've had this situation where it's just I'm looking at it too early.
Yeah.
That's what I'll tell the person. I'll say, look, this needs I need you to go back and look at this on your own again. It's just not ready to be seen by someone else.
Yeah.
And that's honest, right? Because I could spend all my time picking apart individual details, but what it really comes down to is it's just not, it's not there yet.
Yeah. And like, especially when you're like a new writer and you're still learning and stuff, it's very important. Finish your first draft and put it in a drawer for like a month.
Yeah.
And then take it out and read over it and see it with fresh eyes.
But also finish your first draft.
Oh God, yes.
I can't believe how many people, and it's a motivation thing, I get it, but I like to give really in-depth feedback about things, and I can't do that without the ending.
Yeah.
And so if you're, there are certain things, especially near the beginning of the story, I'll be reading it and going, okay, this is either a mistake or this is foreshadowing. And I don't know which it is until, we get to the end.
Yeah.
So it really is important, but it's also, in order to finish that first draft, this is going to be one of those things that's going to frustrate people because people are going to go, how? And it's a different technique for everybody. And this is why I work with people one-on-one. Silencing your inner critic is really, really important.
Oh God, you really have to learn to shut that voice up
And
for a bit.
yeah, it's super hard when I'm doing daily YouTube content and being on social media to do that sometimes. I know, especially when I write Princess Sparkle Muffin, I have to be in a particular headspace.
Oh yeah.
And, she's in a world where things are polite and her parents love her and she's got an element of, power, but also
I wonder what that's
influence.
like.
Well, that's the thing. I have to put myself in that place to figure out what she'd say. And if I'm off balance at all, I can't do it because she's very gentle.
Yeah.
When someone it's like a lot of okay, because she recognizes she's been raised like, no, no Sparkle Muffin, you're very lucky. You've grown up in a palace with lots of pretty dresses and people have less than you. So she's just like, when someone's going, and that was the progression with Zarkazan, is she did that. This person's just gone through a bad time. No, this person's a bad person, and so to be in that headspace, I can't do it when it's just been, a comment section shit show.
Yeah.
And Solomon, oh yeah, no problem. Right? No problem. But she's just, and I think the thing people like about the character is there is that purity.
Yeah.
But it's funny to me how many people who seem to really gravitate towards those, almost angelic type characters, they're just brutal in everything in their own stuff.
I think it's mommy issues.
Probably, or some female figure from their past, but I don't think they understand how much they're crushing that spirit with that behavior.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to bring the energy to something that you want back. Right. And I think too many people have been so abused that they don't realize how they're coming across because I test people, right? When they come at me. And it's like, all right, if this person's coming at me in good faith, they will be able to handle the velocity that they've dished out. So we're going to try that and see how it goes. And most people cannot take what they dish out.
No.
And that's my litmus test for whether I'm going to listen to somebody. Whether they can, if they come at me hard and they can handle hard, no problem. Fine. Cool. That's fair. I know how to deal with that person. But if somebody is coming to the table acting one way and expecting way more out of me than they're willing to give, why? I don't know them. I don't know them I don't owe them anything. I don't work for them. They're not paying me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
I miss the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have done unto you.
Well, and don't do unto others things you don't like.
Yeah.
And because people manipulate the golden rule, right? They insist, I'd be fine if somebody said that to me. Oh, please. You test them on that and no, they can't handle it.
The evidence would beg to differ.
Well, and people who actually can handle criticism don't go around spraying it everywhere.
No.
They don't. That's people, like you said, that's people working something out. They're flinging it around because they can't keep it in them anymore.
Because criticism, when it's done properly, it's a tool. It's supposed to help someone.
Yeah. Well,
not to tear them down. It's to help them improve.
Like I said, it's not always to help them improve. Sometimes it's because someone hates them. Though I admit, in my heart of hearts, I'm still hoping J.K. Rowling will come out of whatever she's going through. I admit that. I just I hope she gets help someday, because holy shit.
I just don't know how that can happen, but
well, at this point she is probably too far gone. I'm starting to realize that. But there's a an example where people coming to her defense is not helping things.
I will say though, I don't think people attacking her directly helps either. Because when you're attacked, you bear down and you
But
double down.
she searches her own damn name.
Well, yeah, and
Look
I
at
already
what
talked
people
about
are
how that's a
saying. Like,
terrible idea.
that's what happened to me. Like, I just made a comment about her. I didn't at her. And either she was searching her name or someone sent it to her. But I wouldn't send something like that to someone. She's a it's the same. It's the same thing I do. Say what you want about me, where I can't see it. That's free speech. Have at it. Why would anybody search their name? And I do think there are people whipping her up. I do.
Oh, absolutely.
Because otherwise, why would anybody choose to?
Because she's a big name that agrees with them. And so it gives them a sense of validation.
But that's the thing. Why would she choose for her legacy to be this? Because we've all seen, what happens to Roald Dahl, for instance, right? I mean, even Dickens, there's struggling with anti-Semitism. Walt Disney, some of the comments he made, people hold that. So, if you're a student of literary history, advocate for things, not against things.
Mhm.
Like if you're early on the bandwagon regarding rights for a marginalized group, well, that can only work in your favor as history moves forward. But actively opposing rights for people, that's going to age poorly. I can't think of a time it hasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of a time where somebody tried to slow progress and turned out looking like the hero. And there's an example of if she had somebody, I mean, we saw with that fourth book, all of a sudden she didn't have an editor. And they became bloated and overwritten, and because Walmart wanted thicker books so they could undercut on price.
And we're still living with the consequences today.
Yep.
Like, I felt so bad that volume 1 of Calidus it's only going to be like 300 pages or so. I'm like, oh, but like most fantasy books that come out nowadays, they're like 500, 600, 700 pages.
Don't feel bad for that, because first authors don't get that page count.
Yeah, but
that's
even
only
then,
established ones.
Even then, I thought about it and I'm like, I hate sitting down to a 24-hour audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want that. I would much rather have just 6-7 hours that I can do in a day.
That's an interesting metric. It's not the page count, it's the length of the audiobook.
Okay, I don't have time to sit down and read because I feel guilty if I'm sitting there and just reading and not doing something. So I generally listen to audiobooks. So that's how I tend to think of things.
Oh, that's interesting, because my problem with audiobooks is I mean, I listen to a lot of classical or jazz because there's no lyrics. Because if I'm doing something and I'm writing, it'll end up writing the lyric of the song into what I'm writing.
See, I don't have that, but it's like if music doesn't have lyrics, I want songs I can sing along to.
Oh, when I'm in the car? Absolutely.
Well, even if I'm writing, like my favorite thing actually to listen to when I'm writing is the BBC did audio plays of Jane Austen's work.
Oh, I'd love to hear those.
They're Audible exclusives.
Okay.
Which I'm really mad about because like I can't afford Audible monthly. Mm-hmm. And it's like, but that's what I want to listen to when I write. And I just had to cancel my subscription because I can't afford it. But it's exclusive. So it's like you can only listen to it when you have an Audible account. I'm so frustrated. Okay. Yeah. But so they've got pretty much all of the finished ones. Emma Thompson narrates Emma.
Oh, that's your favorite one too, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And Billie Piper was which one did she do? Billie Piper does Persuasion.
Ooh.
I believe, which is really well done. So yeah, I recommend those. So, and they're full audio plays. They are a bit abridged, and there's a few points where they changed the dialogue and stuff, but mostly I just have it playing in the background.
But that's great.
No, Billie Piper doesn't do Persuasion. She does not Northanger Abbey. What's the other one? Mansfield Park.
Okay.
So Fanny and Edward, I believe. Yeah, but I love listening to those because like it's Austen's writing. It's Still got some good production values because it's the BBC. So those are a lot of fun to listen to.
See,
But like,
that's the great thing about the British system, though. They'll come in, they probably didn't charge very much to do that because they believed in the project. Because there's no way they could afford it if they charge full freight, right?
yeah.
I love that. The fact that there's a system of giving back
Mhm.
in that, and that's why they continue to churn out really great talent who doesn't go for the Oscar grab roles. They just want stories that entertain.
Yeah.
It's a far superior system to the clout chasing that we do over here.
Yeah. And I mean, I love the old pulp stories, and I love
I like
Austen,
them too.
which I mean, technically I think Austen is kind of the pulp of her day in a way.
In the sense that you have to read between the lines, and what's not said is as important as what is.
Yeah, but also at the time, I doubt people were like, "Oh, this is a future classic literature. This is something we're going to have on the shelf for
Well,
hundreds of years."
it's never that, right?
No, but so yeah, I like Austen. I like pulps, and my writing style is very much like the pulps. So the
Okay,
well
yeah,
done pulps.
you know what? You're right, because it's dynamic.
Mhm.
It's not reflexive. Well, there are a couple times I said, no, make it more active, because yeah, that works. That really works as your style.
Yeah, and my style is also very quick.
Yeah,
So it's like I don't spend pages describing anything because it's everything
yeah,
happens pretty quickly. And there have been times where I'm like, this isn't long enough. I feel like this should go on for more pages, but I said everything I want to say.
right, right. And
But
adding
yeah,
more for it to just be more is never a good idea.
yeah, no.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think that it's funny because, this started off as criticism and ended up being a bunch of stuff we like, but I think that's part of it, right? Because I think to give good criticism, you do have to be able to connect to joy as well. Otherwise, somebody can tell when you're just being miserable
Yeah.
about something. And I do, there's a reason that a lot of professionals are very slow to criticize other professionals because they've been there. And I do think that's part of what's going on with the older actors, quote unquote, defending J.K. Rowling, even though I think it's the wrong move. I think they know, once you've been in the situation where you've said something contentious or you've said something that became cancelable, you do have sympathy for people who are in that situation even when they're wrong.
Yeah.
Not Kanye West, but
Oh my god. Yeah, I was talking to my best friend last night, and he's like, "Have you seen what's happening with this?" And I'm like, "Look, when you're in a conversation with Alex Jones and he's the one who's making sense,
yep,
you've really lost it."
Yeah, but that's what it was designed to do, right?
Really?
Well, yeah, I mean, don't forget, it's Milo Yiannopoulos, right? And he's that was a weird one because, people were actually telling me at the time, he just hates you and we can't figure out why. And that's wild, right? Because here's a guy, he comes across as being independently wealthy, flying to Germany for Mariah Carey concert. He's, rubbing elbows with Steve Bannon and all that shit at the time. And he just hates me. Why? Well, he doesn't know me. So it's not personal. No, but he hates me. He hates me. He got his little goons to try to get me to kill myself. Like, and it's
the thing I get is he's very much an edgelord.
Well, that's the thing. I thought his deal was not personal. And then it's amazing the number of people who, I think it's just sort of a rivalry or a performative locking horns. And then it's,
no, it's very personal.
They really hate you. And that's when things get unnerving, right? There's another group I will not mention because I was actually told by a federal police officer who reviewed footage, this person is dangerous. We're getting red flags off her videos about you.
Wow.
So, it's a good thing they don't live anywhere near you, but just be careful. And when cops actually say that, who normally kind of turn up their nose at internet things, I listen, because normally you get dismissed with
Yeah.
that stuff. I didn't even ask for that one. A friend of mine who's a cop watched it and went, this is something you should know. And that is something I cannot relate to. And I feel very sad for these people, but it's also very important to keep in mind the people who are driven by animosity.
Mhm.
And politicized actors tend to be driven by not ideas. They, why do hardcore progressives do what they do? Well, they hate fascists, right? Why do did I say conservatives? They're hardcore liberals. They hate fascists. They're Antifa, right?
Mhm.
Conservatives will say, why do you do it? I hate liberals. That is not a good reason to do things. What are you for? And because you criticize in service of what you support. Because that, first of all, it makes your criticism higher quality, right? It's going somewhere. And you can tell somebody, like, look, this is what I see here. This is what I see it could be. So
That's probably why most of my criticism comes down to I just want good storytelling.
Yeah, like my feedback is in service, and I unless I have been asked by someone to give my opinion, I very rarely do. Because I get asked for so much, and some stuff I will actually say to some people, I don't care. Like the Balenciaga stuff.
Mhm.
I think that whole line is utterly ridiculous, and I can't bring myself to care about a company that sells $1,000 high-heeled Crocs and $250 Simpson t-shirts.
They actually used to do really nice classic designs back
Did
in the
they?
50s.
Because
Yeah.
the stuff I looked up, because I'm like, what the hell is this? I'm like, this is clothing for rich, stupid people. Everyone who buys this is probably already an awful person. I can't be fucked.
On Instagram, even Dita Von Teese posted a picture of like this model from the 50s for Balenciaga years ago. Obviously.
Oh, so that's what they used to do, and they've descended into kitsch.
And she said back when Balenciaga used to be good, they've been trash for years, and she normally doesn't talk like that.
Yeah, and I just looked at this stuff, and it's like, this just seems on brand to me, because anybody, as far as I'm concerned, anybody who is selling $250 youth clothes, because this was a kid's t-shirt with the Simpsons.
No, it's okay. I'm gonna reference Kanye just because I can't think of a better example right now. But like before he went totally crazy, it's the kind of thing Kim and Kanye would buy for their kids.
Right, and that's not how to parent, right? Like
no, they bought one of Michael Jackson's jackets and gave it to their daughter and had it tailored for her. And I was like, oh, so, and this was before the Marilyn dress. I'm like, oh, so you guys have a history of this.
It's parasitic.
Yeah.
That's reflected glory, right? Like that's the Borg. And there you go. Terrible people. So it's terrible people being terrible. I don't see how this is off brand, and I don't feel the need to comment about that stuff. And part of it is because I just don't care.
Yeah.
And I think if you start just negging just to get people to pay attention to you, or to ride the hashtag, I think that then it starts eating your soul. And then your criticism's not worth anything, because we all know those personalities who started off as having a point.
Yeah.
And they just got more and more obsessed with, their clicks and their followers and the algorithm and all that stuff. And now they don't really have anything of use to say, because it's just blah, blah, blah about everything.
Yeah. Well, anyone who follows me knows I cared very much about the Marilyn Monroe dress.
I just thought, like I said, that the parasites, it's the Borg.
Pretty much.
You are trying to steal the iconography of someone you are not. And when you're doing that, you're never going to be you.
You know, HBO years back did a mini series about President John Adams.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a point where his wife says to him, "You do not need to quote great men in order to prove that you are one."
It does the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely does the opposite. It shows that, you know, and sometimes a good quote is awesome. Sometimes somebody came up with a better phrase than you ever will on the subject, so go ahead and use it. But if that's all you're doing, I mean, plenty of people invoke Marilyn Monroe's style
Mm-hmm.
without it being the actual dress.
Yes.
For some odd reason,
Especially since she had a recreation made
yeah,
that actually fit her.
personally, I think it's more respectful to wear the recreation because, okay, you're channeling that thing. That's awesome. But some things don't belong to you. And it's one thing to wear like a brooch that somebody may have worn like that'll hold up. And if it does get, you know, if it loses, if a clasp gets bent or something like that, it can be repaired.
Yeah,
But
it's not damaging fabric that we can't even make anymore.
Yeah, and there's no way to wear that stuff. Anybody that's done bridal modeling or anything like that, you wear those dresses on the runway, you drop beads.
Oh yeah.
That's why they're overbeaded.
Yeah.
It just that was designed to attention seek. And I mean, Kanye just, it's clear based on, you know, the stuff he put up on Twitter after the Alex Jones thing. This whole thing is him being unable to handle that she left him. And who can blame her?
Yeah, I never thought I would say good for her for anything, especially after the dress. But like talking to a friend last night, and I'm like, good for her for getting out.
Yeah, nobody can blame her for getting away from that ego show. Like that guy, you know, there's mental illness and then there's that, right?
Yeah.
Because people who are mentally ill, they know. I mean, look at Carrie Fisher, real mental health struggles, but she owned it. And when she was not in a good place, she didn't go on a live stream and act like a lunatic. You know, adults are responsible for what they do. Your diagnosis is not a get out of jail free card. It's a starting point. It's a roadmap for how you can have a life that isn't controlled by your illness. And I mean, that's a real criticism I have of some people. It's like, oh, they talked about their mental health struggles. Okay, where's the successes? You know,
it's not a justification.
Yeah, it's not.
It's an explanation. It's not a justification.
It's an explanation, and in some cases, it's kind of begging for mercy. But there's a difference between, you know, somebody like Carrie Fisher, who was very no varnish about her mental health struggles, compared to somebody like Kanye West. And I mean, you know, I think Carrie Fisher would probably be still alive if the media hadn't been so horrendous to her. And that's why I don't know why people who claim to be Star Wars fans go after the actors. Because I mean, Carrie Fisher made that quote about, you know, my what is it? My body, some comment, and it hurts my feeling. And the fact that people claim that she's their princess, that they care about her so much, and yet they don't take that lesson of, just because people aren't talking about how much the onslaught of attention, positive and negative, is getting to them, doesn't mean it's not a possibility. So please, you know, behave with care when you do feel the need to say something. And for God's sakes, make sure it's going in the right place. Right? People don't cast themselves. Nobody shows up for work with something like that wanting to do a bad job. It's a dream gig
Yeah.
for a lot of people. And, so people could be badly directed. Something could have gone wrong with the production. I mean, a lot of those early Disney Plus series, they were COVID shows, right? So yeah, they have some flaws. I think it's okay to point out the flaws, but then go, yeah, but COVID, okay. Right?
Yeah.
But also sometimes if you get the criticism right, I've done this. I did something and people didn't listen to me the first time. And then there's criticism and I go, you see? And then they listen to you next time. So the right criticism can actually empower the staff to be able to do what they wanted to do the first time. And normally when you see something change really fast in response to criticism, that's why. Because there was already an internal fight about it.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, there is a more and less effective way to criticize. And just because people see somebody getting attention, or it seems like a company made changes because of a very vocal critic, doesn't mean it's so. First of all, correlation isn't causation. Second of all those companies go back and they do market research, right? And they crunch the analytics. And if the analytics aren't matching the criticism, they don't touch it. If something in the analytics is making them think that maybe there's something to this, then they'll look into it. But it's not because the critic was super nasty. It was in spite of that. It's because their data showed that perhaps as nasty as it was, they were right. But they're not responding to that particular critic. They're looking at the data. It's not the same.
Yeah.
And I mean, data insights and all that stuff, that's a big business for media. So it's people really need to settle down about the conspiracies, because if you that's another thing. If you seem invested in conspiracy, people are not going to listen to your critiques.
No, it's just exhausting after a while.
That it's just sort of like, okay, I need you to take it down about 6 notches because it is going by me so fast. I don't even understand what you're saying. It's not even a lack of interest. It's just you're so overwhelmed by the emotion. And then of course you tell somebody you tell somebody that and I'm calm. All right, this is a waste of my time.
Yeah.
So speaking of time, we should probably wrap. I think this is a good place to land because we did the
I think so.
criticism. And yeah, so this has been Two Women Talking with Song W. Erson and me, Leanna. And yeah, help Song afford Audible. Kick her some buy her a coffee on Ko-Fi. Come out. Okay, this is what you do though. It's a specific ask, because when somebody's just like, oh, okay, whatever. But okay, she needs Audible, guys. Like, give her a few bucks on coffee. Help her out with that.
It would be much appreciated.
Yeah, this is something is hard for me, and I've been told over and over again, you have to ask, and it's so hard. But okay, fair criticism. For all those people who say I don't hear that I don't handle criticism well anymore. It was something they leveled at me when I was less well known. But it's still funny because of how ridiculous it was. But yeah, that was something I learned from criticism. But yeah, check out the It's Not Therapy Bubbles. I have a Patreon and a coffee too. We're probably going to be doing some events in the new year, and we'll probably start with patrons and people like that, something like that. So be on the lookout for that. If you want to be first to hear about that stuff, that's the way to do it. Become a patron. Lots of I hate the word shilling because it's taken a negative. I thought that was just sort of funny. Okay, we're shilling, but now it's a bad thing. Yeah. So I can't say it as a joke. People keep taking away my jokes. I don't like that.
It's so frustrating.
It is.
Let's have fun things, darn it.
Yeah, because I mean, I don't take very many things seriously, and that's a good thing. And when people force me to be serious, it's sort of just, I don't know, I'm like Plastic Man. That way, the more you try to force me to be serious, the more my brain kind of rebels and goes, no, I'm going to make myself into a mailbox or like a hang glider because that's fun. And you're not being fun right now. And we're all about the fun. I hope you guys had fun listening to these two women talking. And I don't know if there'll be another one before Christmas at this point. We'll have to figure it out. Maybe there will be. Maybe we'll do a rare one-off. Who knows? But bye for now.
Bye-bye.